Hi, everybody. It's time for Reading with Mr. Bob as we continue on with The Hobbit. And I hope you've been enjoying the story. As I told you in previous episodes, I've been a lover of J.R.R. Tolkien's work most of my life. In fact, I was read this particular book when I was in sixth grade by my teacher, Mrs. Dickerson, at Harrison Elementary School in Cottage Grove, Oregon. So, it's been around a long time. It was old when it was read to me, which would have been right around about 1972, 73, thereabouts. So it tells you how old I am. So I hope you enjoy it. We're continuing on in our story. The chapters are various sizes, and so some chapters we'll be able to read in one session. Some chapters it'll take us more than one. But we are on chapter 4 now, Overhill and Underhill, and this is where the story starts getting very exciting. I hope you enjoy it. There were many paths that led up into those mountains, and many passes over them. But most of the paths were cheats and deceptions and led nowhere or to bad ends. And most of the passes were infested by evil things and dreadful dangers. The dwarves and the hobbit, helped by the wise advice of Elrond and the knowledge and memory of Gandalf, took the right road to the right pass. Long days after they climbed up out of the valley and left the last homely house, miles behind, they were still going up and up and up. It was a hard path and a dangerous path, a crooked way and a long, lonely and a long way. Now they could look back over the lands they had left, laid out behind them far below. Far, far away in the west, where things were blue and faint, Bilbo knew there lay his own country of safe and comfortable things. And his little hobbit hole. He shivered. You know what's funny? I'm going to take a break for a second just to talk to you about this, because this is an important part of the story. Bilbo is on an adventure, but things are getting difficult. And he's remembering how things were when they were safe and comfortable back at his own hobbit hole. As things get kind of weird and we're having to stay at home more and more because of the illness, the COVID-19, it's not unusual for us to remember how things were back before all these things happened. And I think it's a good thing because it's important to remember what we have sometimes because we forget it. We take for granted the things that we have until we don't have them anymore. And I think difficult times like this are important for us to do that, to remember what we have and to appreciate what we have when we have it. And perhaps some of you now are starting to miss some of your friends, maybe even miss some of your teachers or school or whatever else. It's important that when you do get a chance to come back, that you learn to appreciate it and to let people know that you appreciate it. Anyway, just a little editorial from Mr. Bob. He shivered. It was getting bitter cold up there. And the wind came shrill among the rocks. Boulders, too, at times came galloping down the mountainside, let loose by midday sun upon the snow, and passed among them, which was lucky, and over their heads, which was alarming. The nights were comfortless and chill, and they did not dare to sing or talk too loud, for the echoes were uncanny, and the silence seemed to dislike being broken, except by the noise of water and the wail of wind and the crack of stone. The summer is getting on down below, thought Bilbo, and haymaking is going on and picnics. They will be harvesting and blackberrying before we even begin to go down the other side at this rate. And the others were thinking equally gloomy thoughts. Although when they had said goodbye to Elrond in the high hope of a midsummer morning, they had spoken gaily of the passage beyond the mountains, and of riding swift across the lands beyond. They had thought of coming to the secret door in the lonely mountain, perhaps that very next first moon of autumn. And perhaps it will be Durin's day, they had said. Only Gandalf had shaken his head and said nothing. Dwarves had not passed that way for many years, but Gandalf had, and he knew how evil and danger had grown and thriven in the wild, since the dragons had driven men from the lands, and the goblins had spread in secret after the battle of the mines of Moria. Thriven is kind of a past tense of thrive. In other words, that bad and evil things had grown to thrive in the wild here. Anyway, just a little vocabulary test there. Even the good plans of wise wizards, again, often of good friends like Elrond, go astray sometimes when you are off on dangerous adventures over the edge of the wild. And Gandalf was a wise enough wizard to know it. And another little editorial comment. Sometimes people want to blame other people, the government, our governor, our president, people, for this illness that has spread so far. You know, this is not something you can blame anybody for. These are the kind of things that only happen once every 100 years or so. In fact, the last time this kind of thing happened in the whole world was in 1918, just about over 100 years ago. Many more people died from that. It was a flu epidemic, and perhaps you've heard about that. And I just say that because our tendency is to want to blame somebody when something bad happens. But no matter how good people are, no matter how much we prepare, no matter how rich we are, there are some things we can never prepare for. We just don't know is going to happen. And so just something for someone who's been around for a long time. Don't necessarily always look to blame somebody for something bad that happens. He knew that something unexpected might happen, and he hardly dared to hope that they would pass without fearful adventure over those great tall mountains with lonely peaks and valleys where no king ruled. They did not. All was well until one day they met a thunderstorm. More than a thunderstorm, a thunder battle. You know how terrific a really big thunderstorm can be down in the land and in a river valley, especially at times when two great thunderstorms meet and clash. More terrible still are thunder and lightning in the mountains at night, when storms come up from east and west and make war. The lightning splinters on the peaks, and rocks shiver, and great crashes split the air and grow rolling and tumbling into every cave and hollow. The darkness is filled with overwhelming noise and sudden light. Bilbo had never seen or imagined anything of the kind. They were high up in a narrow place, with a dreadful fall into a dim valley at one side of them. There they were sheltering under a hanging rock for the night, and Bilbo lay beneath a blanket and shook from head to toe. When he peeped out in the lightning flashes, he saw that across the valley the stone giants were out and were hurling rocks at one another for a game, and catching them, and tossing them down into the darkness where they smashed among the trees far below, or splintered into little bits with a bang. Then came a wind and a rain, and the wind whipped into the rain, and the hail about in every direction, so that an overhanging rock was no protection at all. Soon they were getting drenched, and their ponies were standing with their heads down, and their tails between their legs, and some of them were whinnying with fright. They could hear the giants guffawing and shouting all over the mountainsides. "This won't do at all," said Thorin. "If we don't get blown off or drowned or struck by lightning, we shall be picked up by some giant and kicked sky high for a football." "Well, if you know of anywhere better, take us there," said Gandalf, who was feeling very grumpy and was far from happy about the giants himself. The end of their argument was that they sent Fili and Kili to look for a better shelter. They had very sharp eyes, and being the youngest of the dwarves by some 50 years, they usually got these sort of jobs, when everybody could see that it was absolutely no use sending Bilbo. There is nothing like looking if you want to find something, or so Thorin said to the young dwarves. You certainly usually find something if you look, but it is not always quite the something you are after. So it proved on this occasion. Soon Fili and Kili came crawling back, holding onto the rocks in the wind. "We have found a dry cave," they said, "not far around the corner, and ponies and all could fit inside." "Have you thoroughly explored it?" said the wizard, who knew that the caves in the mountains were seldom unoccupied. Yes, they said, though everybody knew that they could not have been long about it. They had come back too quick. It isn't all that big. It does not go that far back. That, of course, is the dangerous part about caves. You don't know how far back they go, sometimes, or where a passage behind may lead to, or what is waiting for you inside. But now Fili and Kili's news seemed good enough. If you've ever played Minecraft, you know how this works for caves. So they all got up and prepared to move. The wind was howling and the thunder still growling, and they had a business getting themselves and their ponies along. Still, it was not very far to go, and before long they came to a big rock standing out into the path. If you stepped behind, you found a low arch in the side of the mountain. There was just room to get the ponies through with a squeeze when they had unpacked and unsaddled. As they passed under the arch, it was good to hear the wind and the rain outside instead of all about them, and to feel safe from the giants and the rocks. But the wizard was taking no risks. He lit up his wand, as he did that day in Bilbo's dining room. It seemed so long ago now. But if you remember, and by its light they explored the cave from end to end. It seemed quite a fair size, but not too large and mysterious. It had a dry floor and some comfortable nooks. At one end there was room for the ponies, and there they stood, mighty glad of the change, steaming and champing in their nosebags. Oin and Gloin wanted to light a fire at the door to dry their clothes, but Gandalf would not hear of it. So they spread out all their wet things on the floor and got dry ones out of their bundles. Then they made their blankets comfortable, got out their pipes, and blew smoke rings, which Gandalf turned into different colors and set dancing up by the roof to amuse them. They talked and forgot about the storm and discussed what each would do with his share of the treasure when they got it, which at the moment did not seem so impossible. And so they dropped off to sleep one by one. And that was the last time that they used the ponies, packages, baggage, tools, and paraphernalia that they had brought with them. It turned out a good thing that night that they had brought little Bilbo with them after all, for somehow he did not go to sleep for a long while, and when he did sleep he had very nasty dreams. He dreamed that a crack in the wall at the back of the cave got bigger and bigger, and opened wider and wider, and he was very afraid but could not call out or do anything but lie and look. Then he dreamed that the floor of the cave was giving away, and he was slipping, beginning to fall down, goodness knows where to. At that part, he woke up with a horrible start, and found out that his dream was true. A crack had opened at the back of the cave, and was already a wide passage. He was just in time to see the last of the ponies' tails disappearing into it. Of course, he gave a very loud yell, and as loud a yell as a hobbit can give, which is surprising for their size. Out jumped the goblins. Big goblins, great, ugly-looking goblins. Lots of goblins. Before you could say rocks and blocks, there were 6 to each dwarf at least, and 2 even for Bilbo, and they were all grabbed and carried to the crack before you could say tinder and flint. But not Gandalf. Bilbo's yell had done that much good. It had wakened him up wide in a splintered second, and when goblins came to grab him, there was a terrible flash like lightning in the cave, a smell like gunpowder, and several of them fell dead. The crack closed with a snap, and Bilbo and the dwarves were on the wrong side of it. Where was Gandalf? Of that, neither they nor the goblins had any idea, and the goblins did not wait to find out. It was a deep, dark, cave such as only goblins that have taken to living in the heart of the mountains can see through. The passages there went crossed and tangled in all directions, but the goblins knew their way as well as you do to the nearest post office, and the way went down and was most horribly stuffy. The goblins were rough and pinched unmercifully, and chuckled and laughed in their horrible, stony voices. And Bilbo was more unhappy even than when the troll had picked him up by his toes. He wished again and again for his nice, bright hobbit hole. Not for the last time. And we're going to stop there as we continue on with Overhill and Underhill in The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Hopefully we'll be able to talk again soon. This is Mr. Bob saying goodbye, and continue with your schoolwork. Continue to do what you need to do. Continue to get better. These are important days, and even though we're not able to meet at school, these are important things to do. This is Mr. Bob saying goodbye. Thank you very much.